All right, we're back. It's Oddly Cinematic. Today we're going to talk about a movie we're both really excited for, and we want other people to be excited for. Dan, let's talk about Morbius.
Let's do it.
No, we're not talking about Morbius. Today we are talking about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So this is going to be a non-spoiler conversation. Beyond this simple plot synopsis, we're going to try not to discuss what actually happens in the film. So the plot synopsis for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once is Evelyn, an aging Chinese immigrant, operates a failing laundromat with her kind-hearted husband, Wayman, and her emotionally detached daughter, Joy. As she attempts to reconcile her tax debts with the IRS, she is thrust into a psychedelic journey of self-discovery through infinite universes. It's heavy.
That is heavy.
Before we get into the movie itself, I just want to talk about the directors for a second.
Right.
Daniels.
You
should try out to be the third Daniel.
I really should.
That'd be cool. So Daniels is a collection of two directors named Daniel. They met Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinhardt. We didn't pick up the pronunciation on his.
No, should have done that.
There's a lot of Asian actors who we wanted to make sure we were pronouncing their names right. The American director that we just forgot. I just looked up his name too. We are pronouncing it.
Is it Scheinert?
It's Scheinert. It's not Schreiner. It's Scheinert. So these two guys met while studying film at Emerson College in Boston. They started making short films together. Shortly, it was clear that their combined insights led to amazing results, and thus the director duo was born. From there, they went on to create a run of short films and successful music videos for acts like Manchester Orchestra, Foster the People, The Shins, Tenacious D. Then they kind of hit this like virality in 2014 when they made the music video for DJ Snake and Lil Jon's song "Turn Down for What?"
Turn Down for What?
Which is an amazing music video. And then they made their feature film debut with Swiss Army Man, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, and banked them the Sundance Directing Award. And since then, they have been kind of working on projects independently, but they are back now together with their latest film released by A24. What was your temperature on the Daniels going into this?
Definitely, like they weren't top of mind necessarily, but I was certainly looking forward to whatever they did next.
Yeah.
I had seen the Turn Down for What music video, but the first time I heard their name as Daniels, which I thought immediately was like, oh, that's so charming.
Yeah.
That they just go by Daniels, was at that Sundance Film Festival when that movie kind of popped up and premiered there. It was there was a bit of a buzz about it just because of the content of the movie.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, after I finally saw that movie, you can see, man, they're just absolutely wild. And so, of course, you're looking forward to whatever they're going to do next. I haven't seen, what is it, The Death of Dick Long? Is that the
so that was the one
solo feature by Daniel Scheinert?
So yeah, that was the one he made in between Swiss Army Man and this one. He just went off and kind of made this film by himself, which I think it's a little more grounded, but does still kind of encapsulate their viewpoint of the world, which is essentially like how weird and awkward humanity is, but still not letting go of like the nice things that make us human. It's just like a combination of all those things.
Exactly. They're Tim and Eric, but with like a lot of heart.
Yeah. And not just like to take the piss out of things. Like they have an end game with all of their weirdness. And Swiss Army Man, like you mentioned, that having kind of a weird reception at Sundance, which I think led to actually people walking out.
Yeah.
And if people listening to this aren't familiar with Swiss Army Man, it's a movie that's essentially about a farting corpse and a guy who is shipwrecked on an island and the relationship he forms with this farting corpse. And it's like genuinely one of my favorite movies in the past decade. I love Swiss Army Man. So yeah, huge fan. I was really excited for this. So we, found the one pre-screening that they had in Utah, which ended up being in Orem. I don't know why.
It was all the way down there, yeah.
But we did get lucky in that they showed it on the IMAX screen down there. So that was awesome. So we caught that last week. The theater wasn't packed, but had a pretty decent turnout. However, I would say kind of felt like it was packed once we got into the meat of it. You know, everyone on our row, and I think outside of our row, was kind of cackling and crying the entire time.
Right. I can't even speak to necessarily how like the movie was playing during the movie, because our row kind of like I was laughing so constantly.
Yeah.
that I wasn't really paying attention. Like, I don't know. It wasn't until some of the more emotional parts where I was like, oh, I can hear sniffles in here.
Yeah,
and that's when I was like, oh yeah, there's other people in this theater outside of me and my friends. And leaving the theater, everybody we walked past, like it seemed like everybody was us. We just had this group of people talking about the movie, and then 5 feet away there's another group, and just scattered from the exit of the movie theater to the exit of the actual building.
Yeah,
there's just tons of people just standing around talking about how good of a time they had.
Yeah, it was like the energy leaving the theater. No one was like waiting for this movie to end. I usually get kind of nervous about talking about the movie right in the lobby because there's usually people walking in. Lobby was pretty much empty by then,
right.
And so it just was full of people talking about this movie. Kind of the exact opposite effect of when I went and saw The Last Airbender, the M. Night Shyamalan, where it was like the energy going into it was huge. People were dressed up like characters from Avatar and all this, and then just it was like a funeral procession leaving the theater.
Yeah.
Everyone was quiet. No one was talking. So yeah, it was a great screening. I think this movie is one of those movies that could be burned by its marketing if it doesn't set it up right. The marketing they've done, I think, is really good, but it's just a story that's really hard to reduce into a plot summary.
It really is.
But it also, at the same time, it's almost something that's impossible to give away in marketing. Like, it seems unspoilable, but also very hard to set up. As far as the story goes, what did you think?
I think that you just put it pretty perfectly. Like it is doing so much. Like if I just sat there and explained to people everything that happens in this movie, or every, like, I don't know, it's filled with jokes, filled with set pieces, filled with action and emotion, and one would be forgiven for being like, oh, that sounds quite stuffed.
Yeah.
And it is, but it really works, like it seems effortless to them for some reason, despite it being like so extra. Like I think that they would probably agree that it's like, oh yeah, we're extra. Like everything we're doing is extra, but this doesn't seem like it. It just seems very like it rolls right off. And
I think if you're looking forward to this and you know their other work, you're pretty ready for their extraness. That's like that's part of their whole brand. And I didn't look up the runtime before we went into it. And I didn't even, I just went into it completely blind. And then after leaving, I realized it's a pretty long movie.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that.
No, it did not at all.
Pacing, they knew exactly when to slow things down and exactly when to speed them up. The movie shifts from more grounded, mundane set pieces to completely fantastical set pieces. And the way they pace that stuff is really well done. I think some of the story beats that this movie explores handled this specific thing better than a movie we just talked about, Turning Red, which was giving us the perspective of like the Asian immigrant. And not even necessarily the Asian immigrant, just immigrant life in North America.
Right.
And when we talked about that movie, I was saying, I wish I would have gotten a little bit more out of that aspect of it. And this movie really hammers that home.
It does.
Okay, let's talk about the visuals. What were your thoughts just on the the look of this film?
Just a feast. You know, it's one of those things where like we're going to have to watch it 5 to 10 times and maybe even then I won't really be able to digest everything that's being thrown at me. Like you mentioned, you and I were texting after the screening, and we were just like, every single like frame is stuffed with some either joke or visual cue or like something that is tied to an emotion. And like, that's so true. Half of the jokes in this movie visually would be like the best joke in a bunch of other movies. And they're almost just like totally forgotten in this movie.
I know. Yeah. And it's funny because we watched the movie and there's a lot of things hidden in the background. Some of these things were actually in the trailer and I didn't even know.
Right.
And then I went back and watched the trailer and I'm like, oh, all these little things that I thought were just like set decoration actually have like purpose in the film.
I mean, there's something on the poster, which I'm not going to point it out because then people will look at the poster, but there's something on the poster that I had not even noticed on the poster until after I saw the movie. And the only reason I noticed after I saw the movie is because of how big of a part it plays in the movie.
Yeah, there seems every single frame, there seems to be this intentionality where there's like that prop is there for a reason. The set decoration, like the cinematography, the kind of direction with the set decoration, the costumes, all of it has intentionality.
Right.
There's a reason for every little bit in every single frame. And we've been comparing this a lot to Mad Max in just the feeling that we got from it. But honestly, visually, it has a lot in common with that too, where it's just like you look at every single car in Mad Max and you can kind of get the story of that car,
right,
or what the purpose of it is, or the different weapons that they have. You're like, oh, I know what that does before they even use it. Like
exactly.
And there's just so much detail like that, and it's just amazing.
I think that going even further too. Like switching up aspect ratios is nothing new these days. You know what I mean? Like it happens constantly, especially in these action movies where, you know, it's like, oh, well, we filmed this scene in IMAX, so we're going to show it in IMAX. But like the way that this movie switches its aspect ratios back and forth, the intentionality behind that really lands in a way that like switching your aspect ratios in like Euphoria doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
some of them are stylistic, but here, one, I think there's intentionality behind it. They're like, there's a reason that we're changing the aspect ratio here. And two, it almost doesn't matter because you're so caught into, you know, you're so captivated by everything that's going on that you almost don't notice it.
Right.
You know, it just blends so seamlessly. Performances. Every single person in this movie brings it.
They do.
And in a movie that's not necessarily led by A-listers, I'm worried that a lot of the performances are going to be thrown under the bus kind of on this. Like people aren't going to really recognize that people, you know, how hard people are bringing it. And I honestly don't know if this is going to like scoop up any awards for these types of things. It is a very kind of against the grain movie when it comes to like Oscar fare. But man, the performances in this are amazing. What stuck out to you?
Well, just across the board, like what you're saying, the entire cast brings it, and everyone is playing different versions of a character. Which, so like they're basically like these onions, you know what I mean? And so here's one character, then here's another character, and here's another, and that's just like so impressive. But even outside of that, what they're doing physically, comedically, dramatically, like they're doing all of these things where they're making you laugh in one moment, they're making you cry in one moment, and then they're just like wowing you with like very clear. It's clearly like them doing a lot of their stunts. I mean, that's why you get Michelle Yeoh. You know what I mean? Of course. Is because she can fight like dope shit, and it's just very impressive. And I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis brings like a physicality to her role that is. It's one of the funniest performances that I can like remember seeing in a movie.
And she might be the closest thing to like a standard A-list actor here,
right?
And she does a great job of kind of blending into the story, not, you know, every scene that she's in being like, oh, it's Jamie Lee Curtis again.
Right.
She has her place in the story, and she dedicates herself fully to probably her most insane and unhinged performance. And that includes her new like prepper, Laurie Strode. She won't even say anything. You just like look at her and you're just laughing your ass off. Michelle Yeoh, it seems like we're 30 years past the obvious statement that she's a revelation,
right?
But also still feels underrated. And she gets kind of sprinkled into, you know, specific roles. Like she's a tool that people use, whether it's her, you know, her stunt work, or if it's like an Asian adjacent story, like she was in Crazy Rich Asians and like Shang-Chi.
Right.
Here, she just breaks out of all of that.
She does.
And she is like insanely good. Ke Huy Quan, who hasn't really acted in a major feature since Encino Man.
Right.
In 1992. Most people will probably know him from The Goonies and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And hearing about his involvement in this from an interview with the directors, apparently it was just kind of serendipitous that they were looking for this role, and Ke Huy Quan was just getting back into acting again as an adult, you know, being a child star and kind of getting away from it for a minute. And they like were just like, hey, I wonder if this guy would do it. And they just like were just like, he blended into the character so perfectly that we couldn't think of anyone else at that point.
Well, right. I mean, it seems as if he like married himself to the character. There's so much like it's insane that he hasn't acted in a movie in, you know, 30 years, because you could tell that that's him. You know what I mean? Like only having seen, if you only watched him in Indiana Jones and then watched this movie, you're like, oh, that's the same actor. Do you know what I mean? And that's impressive to me, to not to not act for that long and to come in and in a lot of ways be the emotional backbone of a movie is super impressive to me. And I thought that he was excellent. As Stephanie Hsu, the daughter, I think really.
Oh man.
She really stole my heart in this movie.
Yeah.
I had never heard of her before. I'm not sure I've ever seen her in anything else, but she's holding her own with all these, you know, I mean, like genuine like legends with Jamie Lee Curtis and Michelle Yeoh, you know what I mean? Like they're doing it. They're doing it big.
And, you know, I would think that someone in her position, I think she's done like a little bit of TV, a couple movies. She was in Shang-Chi, but I think she had a very small role in that. So I think for the most part, this is her first kind of big feature role. And, you know, going up against Michelle Yeoh, James Wong, Jamie Lee Curtis, it has to be kind of intimidating.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because of, you know, Daniel's direction in, hey, like, this is so off the rails and so batshit crazy that you need to break out of any kind of nerves and just, you know,
go
commit.
for it.
Because everyone's doing this. And yeah, she just blends right into this. And you would think she's been playing this character for 5 years. After this, if she's not booking major films, Hollywood might be broken.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know that was supposed to be Awkwafina originally?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think that would have worked as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of too much baggage maybe with her character, because she would definitely have to break type, I think, for this character.
Yeah, I think that she actually left to be in Shang-Chi, so.
The thing that I've always loved about Daniels is that they've done this kind of like DIY, like really bare bones like approach to visual effects. They really do have this kind of a scrappy approach to things. And sometimes you can see the seams of it, but they kind of own it,
right?
You know? And I wouldn't say that they're like visual effects or what you would call like ILM realistic,
no.
You know? But they're done in a way that's like fun. Like you know, especially when we were talking about Stephanie Hsu and her character, and she kind of reminded me of like a Scott Pilgrim character, like kind of elevated, you know, performance. And Scott Pilgrim's another one of those movies where it's like the effects are so bonkers that they don't really give a shit about them being realistic.
Right.
But they're still fun to look at.
Exactly.
And I don't think that necessarily you need visual effects to look realistic. Now, that doesn't mean they look bad. They just have their own style and kind of visual, you know?
Well, right. And I think that you nail it on the head with the fun. Like, I think that the word that I put down to describe the visual effects is just they're playful. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they're super playful. They're very energetic, and there's so many of them in this movie.
Yeah. This movie, pretty rich with references.
Right.
And not like in a cheesy, we're doing this exact scene from this exact movie.
No, not at all.
But the stylistic kind of pieces of homage to different movies. When we talked about the visuals and how in certain circumstances the cinematography and the style of it will change, it really did feel like from one scene they were like, we're going to do this like the Wachowskis would do it. And then in another scene they were like, we're going to do this like Wong Kar-wai would do it.
Right.
You know? And it's really kind of sprinkled in there if people are willing to look for it. And what did you think about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it wears it on its sleeve. The references are very much a fabric of the movie. Like, I don't think the movie can exist without those references, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that they're making a film that can only be spoken in the languages of these other films all kind of cobbled together, whether it is The Matrix or something like Kung Fu Hustle or, you know, In the Mood for Love, the Wong Kar-wai stuff. Like, it's all very much...
It's like you said, it's like a shorthand.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Because like you said, there's not like a direct reference to the Matrix. They're not
redoing the like bullet dodging scene from or anything like that. It's not a spoof.
But it's very clearly there. Do you know what I mean? And I think that the way that they do it is it all just makes sense, and it all felt very organic to me in a way that most references do not. You know what I mean? Like not to just constantly bag on Marvel on this episode, but like the way that they're just like, oh, you know, Buck Rogers got a Zune, Chris Pratt this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like every third line, it's like, hey there, Big Lebowski. Come on, you know what I mean?
The approach isn't like, we're going to spoof the Matrix. It's like, how would the Wachowskis shoot this? because
Right.
that's what the story is requiring of this scene.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's like it's almost something that you're not sure if they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, man, that felt really close
Right.
to how that scene plays out. And so they kind of, yeah. And this has always kind of been a big part of their filmography.
Mm-hmm.
They do wear a lot of their influences on their sleeves. You know, one of the famous lines from Swiss Army Man is, if you don't know Jurassic Park, you don't know shit.
And then they do like the Jurassic Park theme in their soundtrack.
Yeah, the Jurassic Park theme is in the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And they even put on like a shadow puppet version of Jurassic Park in the movie. It's incredible.
The only one that like really stuck out to me as like purposeful was the Wong Kar-wai stuff, and that's just because Wong Kar-wai has like this very specific visual identity, especially with regards to like the way he shoots like his conversations and what's going on around them.
Exactly.
There's like this motion blur to the way people walk in his films that like the second I saw that in the movie, I was like, oh, okay, I get what they're going for here, and it just kind of reinforces the theme of that specific scene in a way that you're not going to get with just like a quip.
Yeah, there was even a scene where like the way that the colors were coming off and the way that the lighting was, and even, you know, the scene was played for laughs, but what is kind of happening in the scene reminded me of a Spike Jonze kind of film. So just to kind of round out this conversation, why do you think people should see this movie?
I mean, well, first of all, it's just an absolute blast.
Yeah.
You know, like if you want a good time at the theater, this is probably the best time you're going to have in quite some time. It's a movie for right now. And I know there are a lot of movies for right now, but this one, if you are someone who's like kind of overwhelmed by the noise and just like the decay of what you believe to be like the attitude of the world, then this is a movie that's just going to give you a shot of life. Like there's a line, and I'm not going to obviously say it, but there's a line that Ke Huy Quan's character says in the movie, and I cannot think about it without tearing up.
Yeah,
like I really cannot.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, if you should just go see it. It's a good movie.
Yeah. And I think you stated that perfectly. And to kind of add to that, we've mentioned this before, like in the past week, obviously we've been singing this movie's praises, and we are hesitant to blow this out of proportion. So it's not like, and already I'm seeing the overhyped conversation start to peek through. It's like, is this overhyped? I would just say, like, it doesn't, like, just go see this movie. Like, I promise, and I feel so confident in saying this because I have been tracking the movies that have been coming out this year. This is like hyper original, and we talked about all the homage, but it's almost unnoticeable. The things that this movie is doing are just things that no movies are doing right now.
Right.
And I would venture to say that in the next 5 years, we'll be seeing how this movie affects how other people handle the subject matter. If Marvel even calls Daniels, I'm going to be fucking pissed.
Leave him alone. Don't touch him.
Because I know it's probably going to turn into an Edgar Wright, Phil Lord, Chris Miller situation where they get halfway through the production and they're like, two people can't budge on this thing.
Right.
So, and we don't want that. Screenings are up in Salt Lake right now across the valley.
Yeah, they're starting this weekend. It'll be showing pretty much anywhere you can go see a movie. It seems like it's shown. If it has a decent amount of screens, you should be able to catch a show there. So you should definitely go check it out. I'll say really quick.
Yeah.
I'm in terms of like what you're saying about like there's always going to be like the counter cycle to like the hype cycle, you know what I mean? I feel like I am a person more prone to like wanting to, I am somewhat of a, I don't like this because it's popular and I'm just not that's not this.
Yeah.
It's not this.
Not at all.
It's so good.
So go see Everything Everywhere All at Once, please.
Please.
And come back for the deep dive.
Right.